Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Larry Haas. He's a former spokesman for the Office of Management and Budget during the Clinton administration. He also served as communications director for Vice President Al Gore, and he's now a senior fellow with the American Foreign Policy Council. A couple of weeks ago, Larry was very candid with us about the concerns within the Democratic Party about a possible Bernie Sanders nomination. But on Saturday, after disappointing showings in 3 states, former Vice President Joe Biden scored a dominating win in South Carolina. In response, prominent Democrats in politics, the media, and beyond are rallying around Biden. 3 other candidates have already dropped out, and 2 of them are backing Biden. So lots to talk about here, Larry, and thanks for being with us again.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Greg.
Well, the narrative a week ago was that Biden was on the ropes. He didn't do well in the first 3 states, and he didn't just need to win South Carolina, but he needed to win it big, which he did by 30 points, even more than the widest gap we saw in any polls leading up to that. So that clearly energizes his campaign. But how did the results from 1 state turn Biden from yesterday's news a week ago to the consensus non-Bernie candidate that the party is clearly rallying around at this point?
Well, you know, momentum is a particularly important thing when it comes to politics. And the fact of the matter is that state polls in and of themselves do not tell you anything. They have to be seen in a larger context. And with regard to South Carolina, there was growing concern that Bernie Sanders was just going to run away with this thing because of how strong he looked going forward and how well he had done up to that point. And I think that that affected a lot of non-Bernie people to come out to the polls. Now that Joe Biden seems to have a lot more life in him, there will definitely be an effect in these 14 states that are going to vote tomorrow. Now, how big of an effect, of course, we don't know, but Joe Biden is now looking at as the strong, moderate horse that if you don't like Bernie, you need to rally around. And I think it's very significant that Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, both of whom are moderate and both of whom recently got out of the race, have both decided that they're going to, one of them has already, the other one will tonight, they're going to endorse Joe Biden. So I don't know if we have a completely new race, but we have a significantly new race at this point, and we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Let's talk about Buttigieg and Klobuchar for a second, because Tom Steyer got out Saturday night. He didn't do as well as he hoped to, didn't get in the delegate count, and so that was it for him. But the departures of Buttigieg and Klobuchar surprised quite a few people, especially considering the active campaign schedule they seemed to be on right until they made their decision. So it leaves the impression anyway that someone or some people talked them into this, or at least made a strong case to them in some way. Take us inside this a bit. When it's time for a party to coalesce and you need to unclog a lane, how does that happen? Maybe these candidates did this on their own, but if they didn't, what's the process for kind of saying, it might be time?
Well, that kind of a process was much more prevalent years ago when the parties were a lot stronger and had a lot more ability to usher people out of the race. Party leaders who controlled a lot of the party money and the party machinery would tell people, look, you're not going to get any more support from us, from people and organizations affiliated with us. So you can get out now and do the right thing and be owed a favor, or you can stay in this race and make a lot of enemies. But it's much harder for parties to do that now. And that's because parties are weaker and candidates get their money and get their, manpower and woman power outside of party structures. I'm a little bit more inclined to believe that in an unusual show of high-mindedness, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar both came to the conclusion that the odds that they would win at this point were low enough that they should really do the right thing, allow the party to rally around a moderate and significantly raise the chances of a Democrat beating Donald Trump. I think within Democratic circles, the absolute urgency of beating Trump this year is so great that I think it is beginning to turn candidates into statesmen and stateswomen. I tend to be cynical about these things, but I think there's something going on here that has to do with high-mindedness.
May certainly be that way, but Buttigieg appeared to be on the way to Dallas and then abruptly changed schedules. So it could certainly have played out that way. We haven't heard otherwise. A flood of endorsements in the past 24 hours or so here, Larry, but one glaring omission. President Obama still not weighing in yet. Surprised?
The reports are that he has spoken to Biden and has suggested that an early endorsement of Biden from Obama actually could backfire. And if those reports are true, I could understand why he's saying that. There will be a sense among the hardcore Bernie supporters that once again, their candidate is getting the short end of the stick. Someone's coming in from the outside. It's really not fair. It's just like what happened with Hillary in 2016. And perhaps he believes that the process needs to work its way out, and at a later stage, it will be both more appropriate and more effective. And I think I understand the sentiment. Ex-presidents are in a somewhat dicey spot. They can have their favorites, and I'm sure Joe Biden is Barack Obama's favorite, but they have to do this in a way that is not going to cause a great rift within their party. There's already a big rift. President Obama does not want the gap to be even greater between the far left and the moderates of the party. So I certainly understand why he's holding his fire. And, final point is down in Texas, in California, in North Carolina, will an Obama endorsement make that much of a difference at this stage? I really don't know that it will. So I understand why he's holding his fire.
One of the reasons that Joe Biden didn't do as well as expected in some of the early states is the fact that he's had some verbal stumbles on the trail. And now that this coalescing is happening, is that still a concern that he's going to have more attention? And there may be some more moments like this. He had a moment today where he was quoting the Declaration of Independence that got a little bit mangled. Or is the thinking now that, look, on the Democratic side, this is a binary choice between Biden and Sanders. And after that, if he's the nominee, it's a binary choice between Biden and Trump. And a few malapropisms here isn't going to make the difference.
Well, I think both of those propositions are right. I think undoubtedly we're going to see more linguistic awkwardness from time to time. That's just who Joe Biden is. Having said that, there's a certain authenticity that goes along with that. And as long as he's got the energy and the wherewithal to carry this thing to the end, I think if he's the guy, Democrats, for the most part, are going to rally around him out of the sheer urgency that it's got to be our guy. Particularly if it's a moderate like Joe Biden, it's got to be our guy when you consider 4 more years of the alternative. So both of the things that you said are true. Yes, we will get more malapropisms. Yes, I think if he's the nominee, the party will rally behind him, separate and apart from the malapropisms.
Real quick follow-up on that. When we talk about the verbal stumbles that he has, is there any whisper in the Democratic Party that you know of that it's more than just mangling words?
Oh, sure. I think that, I don't think it's a great secret that people look at his advancing years and just sort of say, when you get to be older, you slow down. Sometimes your memory begins to, weaken a bit. Look, it happens to anyone starting in their 50s, and he, like President Trump, is in his 70s. So I don't think that's a deep, dark secret, but I don't hear the kind of whispering that you seem to be asking me about, which is boy, this guy is really losing it in a big way, and this would really be irresponsible. No, I don't hear that. Okay. I hear the fact that, he's not quite as energized as he was in his 50s, but that's no great surprise. No 70-year-old would be.
We've talked around him a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Bernie now, because this is quickly turning into Bernie against the mainstream Democratic Party. He'll call them the elites or the establishment or something like that, and that everybody's ganging up on him just proves his point that he's the outsider and so forth. But how does Bernie versus Biden play out as this field gets narrowed?
Well, one hopes that the party will come together around, I would hope, a Joe Biden or another moderate. Just keep in mind, there are still, others in the race. Now, I think Biden's, clearly the moderate horse at this point, but, we still have Michael Bloomberg with all of his money, so we will have to see how things play out tomorrow. It's no great, unique reality that we're seeing today. I mean, both parties go through this, the extreme versus the center. This is Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford in 1976. It's Barry Goldwater and Nelson Rockefeller in 1964. It's even Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy in 1980. And those are only, a few of the many, many examples. The issue isn't that the Democratic Party is split. Parties are always split. The issue is, will they come together, and will they come together around the right person who can go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump? And, those are two very big questions. Will Biden get the nomination, as opposed to Bernie, which would threaten that not only wouldn't he win, but would threaten Democratic seats all the way down the ballot, governors, senators, House members. But if Joe Biden gets the nomination, will the Bernie supporters realize what's at stake, and rather than staying home because they're angry that their revolutionary leader didn't get the nomination, will they understand the larger stakes and come to the polls and help defeat Donald Trump? I can't answer those two questions at this point. Nobody can. We're just going to have to see how all of this plays out in the coming months.
Larry, last question, and I think it's worth spending just a moment on it because a lot of folks are saying, wow, all this coalescing is happening so fast. And the reason is because on Super Tuesday, there's a lot of delegates on the line, and getting certain candidates to certain thresholds is going to make a big difference in the race for the nomination and piling up delegates, right? No
question about it. Look, there are over 1,400 delegates at stake. That's a huge chunk. I don't have the precise percentage, but it's a huge chunk of what's needed to eventually win the nomination. Now, you can't, unless something very bizarre happens tomorrow, you can't, in essence, run up such a lead tomorrow that your lead is really insurmountable. There are still a lot of big states that will have their primaries: New York, Florida, Pennsylvania. And keep in mind, there's also this large contingent of what are known as superdelegates. They're not elected. These are appointed Democratic leaders, and they have their own ability to support whoever they want when it comes to the convention. I'll say this. They are overwhelmingly opposed to a Bernie Sanders candidacy. So if it's close between Sanders and Biden, they could put Biden over the edge at the convention.
Well, it's amazing how much can happen in a relatively short period of time. It's a very different conversation than we had just 10 days ago. Larry, thank you very much for your time today. We'll certainly be watching.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Haas, a former spokesman for the Clinton White House Office of Management and Budget, former communications director for Vice President Al Gore, now a senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.